All right, so welcome everyone. I want to introduce you to Ingrid Tremblay. She is a French-Canadian Syrian artist from Montreal. She completed her MFA in Sculpture and Extended Media at the University of Texas in Austin during 2018, where she received the Graduate School Recruitment Fellowship and the Quebec Research Fund Fellowship, among other numerous awards. Prior to her MFA, she earned a BFA from Concordia University, a Bachelor of Science and a Master's of Science from University of Montreal. Tremblay was the recipient of the 2018-2019 Virginia Commonwealth University Fountainhead Fellowship in Sculpture. She also completed residencies at Est in Quebec, NARS Foundation in New York, Jurassic in California, and the Carving Studio and Sculpture Center in Vermont. Her work is recognized and supported by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Quebec Council for the Arts. She has inspired many of us when she was at the Carving Studio and Sculpture Center with her contagious laughter, her spontaneity, her work ethic, and a dedication to her practice. I'd like to now introduce you to Ingrid Tremblay.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Carol.
You're welcome.
I really had a great time when I was at the Carving Studio, so it's really great to be able to be here with you all today. And you spoke about my work ethic. I think we were all like working. I think I never took a day off while I was there. I wanted to make the most out of it, and we were at the interns and everyone were there, in the early morning and until dinner. So it was really a great productive time. So my art practice is definitely sculptural. And I currently work in the contemporary art scene using traditional carving techniques such as like wood carving. I do that for several reasons. One of them is I'm currently interested in making work that is spaced by the body, but also just for practical reason, it's easier for me to just use the tools that I can use in my own studio space. It made me reflect of what it means to make work by hand. I do think there's probably part of my human sensibility that is transferred to my work while I'm making it. So I'm thinking of that. But I also, hey, Helly. I also worked a lot with digital fabrication in the past. So I actually pretty much started with digital fabrication. So I'm also going to show some of that work. But which type of process I'm working with, I really like to be involved at every steps of the process. Okay. Oops. Uh-oh. Why I can't change? Sorry. What's happening? Okay, that's weird. Sorry, I'm back here. I'll share my screen again. Okay, you see?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know why there's still links here. Okay, so I'll start with the most recent work and the handmade work. So this is a piece I made while I was doing an art residency during the pandemic. So I was in an industrial neighborhood in Brooklyn, at a time where we were not really confined, but kind of half confined. And I tried just to find a space where I could go every day and feel very peaceful. So I found this place, which was called a Bush Terminal Pier. So it was a very interesting place to me because I felt, there was something very like the movement of water, something very still, but also very agitated in this place. So it was very calm, but it felt like if the time was suspended. And at the same time, there was a lot of movement. So, and some of those movements were very kind of small, so it wasn't really perceptible in the real time. So I wrote a little text actually about this place. I'll read it now. There's a lot of descriptive writing in my practice. You know, I try to put like this spotlight on some moments that, you know, and that really affect me. So the sun warms the skin and the wind gently slides on the cheeks. A fisherman wearing a bright green face mask on his chin is smoking a cigarette. Another one is holding a fishing rod with one hand and sometimes with two. He is wading with a hoodie on. The waves travel at a higher intensity after a boat has passed. There are a lot of scooters with milk crates parked at the end of the path. A boat passed in the faraway landscape and drew a line on the river. The Statue of Liberty is partially hidden by a crane boat that seems to be installed there permanently. American flags are waving at us. Skyscrapers remind the presence of the city. The fisherman pull his line outside of the water. There are 3 lead weights at the end of the line, no fish. Further on the shore, several lines are standing in between the rocks. Sailboats, ferries, commercial boats, military planes, helicopters, and birds keep crossing the landscape. The fisherman brings his fishing line out again. This time the rod was bending. A seaweed, no fish. He moves 10 feet on the left. Young couples are walking on the shore now. More boats, more helicopters. Everyone is silent. The lower the sun is, the coldest it becomes. The crane is now covering the face of the Statue of Liberty. The fisherman throws his bait in the water. So I kind of just tried to capture this place with descriptive writing. So I will go there every day, and I had all kind of these movements overlapping with one another. And what I was thinking, the idea I had to, you know, I wanted to make at that moment was to try to weave the landscape. So what I did, and I wanted to use video as a sculpture material, not just like making an installation, but you really using video as a sculpture material during the process. So what I did, I took like hundreds of pictures of the same place in the site during the day until dusk. And then I hung fabric stripes on a backdrop at the same place. And then I projected each image on the stripes, and I took new pictures and I moved the stripes in between. So I'm not a video artist, so it's pretty low tech when I do video art. It's very sculptural. So what I did, I lined up the real landscape with the projected landscape together to make one image. And then, so I took new photos and I created a stop motion where the real time and the altered time were kind of merging and meeting. So I'll show it to you right now. Sorry. I'll show the result. So what happened also while the real-time landscape started to fade out because it was dusk, the projected landscape started to appear and become more clear. And the real-time movements are meeting this kind of fast movements. So there are a lot of things that were not really visible with the eye that became visible during this process. Let's see. Okay. So, that was fun to make too, because it gave me a pretext to just be outside every day, which was nice. It took me a little bit to do that. So after this project, I was still in this residency, and I kind of had in mind this idea of making, movement out of something still, stayed in my mind like a still image, or making something very fluid out of something solid. And also because I spent so much time at the shore with the fishermen, I kind of just had the image in my mind of making a fisherman net. So I made this piece, which was made in clay. So it was very like solid clay loops, making this very articulated and malleable object that looked like fabric or like a net. And from there, I kind of wanted to push this idea of making something very malleable out of something solid even more, and using carving. So I decided to carve this type of net shape out of a single slab of wood. So these were wood, this is basswood that was the local wood recycled from pruners. So it took me a bit to figure out the right size and the right technique to be able to do that. I failed a lot. I feel like failure is a very important part of the sculpture process. You know, I feel in school sometimes we expect the students to have a result right away, but you know, in my own art practice, I'm like, sometimes it takes me months to be able to make something happen. And I think, you know, it's like the process of figuring out the way to make, you know, something work is very important as well. So I made this, these loops by carving them. And, you know, at some point I started to be able to detach and have some moving. And this is actually the final result. Took me, you know, some time to finish those. So it's entirely carved. There's no joints. So in this one, I went a bit more into the slab, and it just started to be more movable. This is another one. This one is made in cherry wood. It's a bit more detached. I see them a little bit more like prototypes, I have to say, because you know, I like the patterns on those pieces are very regular, and now I'm starting to think a bit more like in textile work, how, you know, we develop a lot of design and patterns for knitting, lace making, and weaving. For example, Annie Albers tried to document the history of these techniques and also making an inventory of patterns. So I would like to develop my own inventory of way of working woods like fabric, and, you know, including a variety of patterns that are also a bit less regular. And to my knowledge, it's not really a way of carving wood that was explored a lot. You know, we have a little bit in whittling the regular linear chains, or like the ball and cage, and this type of work in which you try to articulate an object through carving, but it was never really pushed to that extent, to my knowledge. So so I really would like to develop this way of carving wood, doing more research into fibers art. Yes. The other thing, that happened while I was doing those pieces, I was in a residency. I mean, it took a while to make them, so I started them in my studio, and I keep working on them in the art residency in Northeast Quebec, called Nord-Est. So this residency is in a small town called Saint-Jean-Port-Joli, which is really known for wood carving. They label themselves like the capital of the world for wood carving. So it was interesting also because the residency was for contemporary artists, and they told me I was the first artist there who actually carved wood. So it was interesting to me, you know, knowing the history of the town. But you know, when I started to make a bit more research about the town, the story that's told there is that three brothers called the three Bérets. So it's André, Médard, and Jean-Julien Bourgault. The story says that they are the precursors of wood carving in the town, and the youngest one, Jean Julien, opened a wood carving school. So people came from all over to learn wood carving there. But two of the son, like the son of the oldest and of the youngest, I met there. So they're both sculptors, and they are in their 80s now. And they both told me, you know, people say that, but it didn't start it with our fathers. It started with their mother, Émilie Legros. And they said that she came from a family of carvers who carved a lot of sculptures in Versailles, the marble sculptors there. And it's funny because I went there recently and I saw the name Legros. So I was like, oh yeah, they actually did that. And so they told me that she's the one who really gave the artistic sensibility to her sons, and this is why they became artists. And they told me that, like, you know, they told this history to so many people, so many historians, and no one really talked about her. And, you know, I thought it was interesting in the way that, you know, like women are often erased from history, and women artists are also erased from history. So it kind of led me to make a bit more research about the women's sculpture in the town. So this town is known for carving ordinary people. That's their brand. You know, when I made my research, I found few names of women artists that, you know, some, you know, they were doing sculpture for a while, and then they got married and they stopped, or they were never really known, or there are few of them are very known. But also I found this work that was made by a lot of women that were working anonymously. And the difference between the work that was made by the women is it was usually smaller, because they, you know, this one is made by a man and the other one were made by women. They're smaller because they were using the wood scraps from the work from the men. And also they didn't have a workshop to work. So usually they wouldn't made with the chisels. They will be made with a knife. So let's say like you're doing this on your porch or something. So it's kind of a little side work. And I just thought it was interesting, this idea of like using the left out. So I took my own wood scraps from the net carving, so my left outs, and tried to think about, like, I wanted to revalorize them a bit, like we should revalorize the left out of history. So I mean, there's way more than this image, but yeah, I have so many. So I use them, and then I start to carve these little icons. So these are based, you know, very loosely inspired by the icons that are, you know, women icons that were carved since the prehistoric time. And we found these icons all over the world. So you know, I thought it was interesting, and I think a lot about how history, you know, there's a written history and there's other places where we can have access to history, and material culture is one of them. And I was just thinking of, you know, how Ursula Le Guin speaks about that, how, you know, we kind of fed the myth of the hunter because spear tips were in stones. So it was a very durable material. And so we just thought, okay, yeah, you know, the prehistoric humans were hunters, or prehistoric men specifically were hunters. But now we know that, you know, the first human were living from gathering. So, you know, the basket maker had a more important role. But, you know, because, you know, basket and fabric and all those things were non-durable material, they will just degrade, and we wouldn't have access to it. So I was thinking of, like, you know, like culture from all over the world we're celebrating this, like these women, you know, the celebrating women and the women, you know, body and fertility, and the power to give life. And we found all these little stones icon, but like I was just thinking, like, how many were probably also carved in wood, and we just like we didn't find those ones, but even though like there's so many of them. And while I was doing that, I mean, I was also pregnant while I was doing this project. So I just thought it was very powerful to kind of, have these little wood scraps and give it like shaping them into these like little women figures and giving life to them while, I was also creating life in my own body and also use the whittling method with the knife because I couldn't really use power tools or anything like that. So yeah, I just found it very nurturing to kind of give life to them and yeah, just so celebrating the power to give life or something. And so this is an ongoing project. They're going to keep growing. So I'm going to make more and more. I don't know, maybe through all my life. I have no idea. I'm just going to keep growing a little bit. So there, a little variety of figures here. Oh, also I wanted to make them, I was thinking of them not in a, not to be something that we stared at, but more something that's meant to be held. Yeah, I feel the kind of, they're more like a size you can carry because they have some sort of protective energy. Okay, this is a little parenthesis. So this is actually, I found this. This is the first carving I made in my life when I was 17, and I wasn't an artist yet. So first I wanted to show that's like, carving was really not a given to me. It's really something I learned, but also this was based on my mother's body. So who had like 4 children. So I just thought it was kind of funny that, more than 20 years later, I also keep like carving icons while I was becoming a mother. Okay. Where am I? Here. I printed on paper because I didn't figure how to have my notes while I was presenting. Very old school, very analog. Okay, so so for a while I thought my projects were very different, but with time we start to have a bigger body of work, and then we start to see themes that emerge. So the idea of transformation of the material is very present in my work, but also having a sculptural approach that meets fibers work without really using fabric. And also, the way that women were a contribution to history, but were at the same time erased from history is also sometimes that comes often in my work. But in relation to that, I also think about, the way that women share their history and knowledge in relation of proximity from one woman to another, and how we can also make a connection with craft art, because this is also knowledge that is passed from one person to another. So I made this piece while I was doing an art residency in Italy, in the town of Guardia San Framondi in Campania, close to Napoli. So it was a medieval town, and while I was doing the research, when I do research, I kind of get to this new place and, start to try to find an idea that something I could do there. And because of the earthquake, there was a lot of stones that were kind of scattered all over the city that fell during the earthquake. And when I asked about them about it, I was like, why you don't clean it? Or they told me, well, we cannot just discard the stones because they are part of our story. They carry our history, So this idea of like an object of stone carrying the history, I found it really interesting. And at some point I found those specific stones that are called tufo. So they're volcanic stones from the Vesuvius. And a lot of carvers there use them, and it's it's an old material because the Romans, it's the first material they used in their constructions. So it was a weird magical place where I said just like, I would like to work with that someday. And the day after, there were 3 stones on my porch. So I was like, okay, well, I have these stones. I have, I don't know, a million of years. And I was just like, try to think what I could do with them. I didn't really want to alter their shape. So I just thought of carving a pattern into them. And because I was in Italy, I thought of, carving lace in them. So I did a trip to Burano to meet, I guess some of the lace maker there still work traditional, but what was most interesting to me was the lace museum there. And I just thought it was so amazing how this art is incredible, because you have all these like needle points that were developed and these patterns that were developed through times, and you have like hunting scene that are like 15 feet, and it's like everything is different, and it's all made with a needle, and it's like and this art was with disregard because it was mostly women who practice it. And I was just like, this work is just so amazing. And at some point I learned that with industrialization, there was only one woman who still knew how to, sorry about my English, I don't speak English a lot these days, but I'm trying my best. With industrialization, there was only one woman, Cynthia Scarpagliola, who knew how to make lace by hand, the traditional Burano Venetian way. And when she was 80 years old, she taught another woman, Anna Bellorio d'Este, who opened a school, and then more women and girls were able to learn it. And because of these two women, we still have this knowledge today. So I just thought it was like interesting with the idea of the stones that carry the history to kind of make a little tribute to them in those stones. So and I carved them with a needle, lace needle, because there were no tool really that was like small enough to be able to carve that type of delicate pattern. So tufa stone is interesting because it's a very, very hard stone, but when you soak it into water, it becomes softer. So you can really, really carve it that way. This is it. Did I forget something? No. Okay. I'm going to go through all the handmade work, and then I'll go into the machine work. So this is an image of New Mexico White Sands Desert. I did my MFA in the south of the US, so I had a chance to travel a bit over there. And, when I was in the desert, I thought it was so kind of fascinating that I really lost the sense of scale in relation to my own body. I was looking at my friend walking at far away distance, and I felt he was the same size as the trees, and it was kind of weird. And we have a bit this feeling also here with the snow. So it was interesting. And I spoke a bit how I'm interested in finding places, little stories or histories, and I think also about memory and history that is embedded within nature. So let's say, like, for example, in Arizona, very close to there, there's a painted desert, and you can really in the geology see all these layers of colors that shows different era. And like the grain of the wood is the memory of the movement of the sun and the pressure of the wind. And if you go in the desert, you also have more ephemeral marks, like the marks of the wind and into the sand. So these little ripples. So I kind of wanted to capture this. Actually, it's interesting also, the ripples made by the wind and the sun and the water are very kind of similar. So I carved this into the wood with chisels. And I was just thinking of how with history we choose to write some stories, and some stories are unwritten, but every kind of motion and action have an impact on the present time, even the motion of the wind. So this was very old school process. This is my carving studio and sculpture center work. So this is the first piece. I made 3 pieces when I was at the carving studio. So this is the first one I carved over there. So I wanted to think about how marble is this very durable material, and it's made out of calcium, and how the human bones are also the most durable things in our body, and it's also made out of calcium. And you know how the rib bones are the most fragile bones of the body, and also kind of protects the most important organs. So I was kind of thinking of, I wanted to make a piece that kind of explored this relation between durability and fragility. Because when you carve marble in this way, like a very thin arc shape, it also become very fragile. So I mean, Haley, you probably remember, but when I was at carving studio, I had my little maquette, my little model for this piece, and it was the alumni week. So, you know, all the men carvers were like, "Oh no, it's not gonna work. Don't do that. Like it's gonna break. You're gonna fail." And I was just very depressed because I really wanted to make that piece. So this is a human bone scale of 8 times. I really wanted to make that piece, and at some point, Tom, the studio manager, just told me like, "Yeah, Ingrid, you should just try it, because you know, sometimes artists, you're artists because you try to do things that other people wouldn't try to do or think to do." And I listened to him, and I did, you know, I went with my first idea, and it worked. So I call it No Regrets, just to tease them a little bit. It was my little revenge. So I did this piece through, like, it took me 1 week, like the first week, and it was pretty much my first, you know, I did this little lace work, but before this piece, I don't think I ever, I mean, and the wood thing that I showed that when I was 17, I really like carved into the material to really shape it, you know, new form out of a block of something. So it was kind of a nice realization, and thank you for allowing me to play with a very expensive piece of marble to figure out that I could actually do this, you know, because I didn't know. So it was a nice discovery. Yeah, and then after, like, other symbolism started to build in this piece, like the idea that the Eve, the women will have come from the men rib bone or things like that. But I didn't really have this in mind at the beginning. So I'm in my studio, and there's a lot of noise around me. And this is the second piece I made. So it's called Bump in the Carpet. So for this piece, well, there was just like, sometimes I feel when we make art, we can allow ourselves to just put the spotlight on something and decided to make this important. Sometimes it's very tiny things, but you know, I just, so there was this bump in the carpet, this carving studio next to the coffee machine. And, you know, at the beginning, we were not awake, trying to get coffee, and people would kind of trip and step in it. And with sometimes I realized that no one really fixed it, but people just started to go around it. And I just thought it was like a very like small scale manifestation of human resilience. And I thought it was kind of funny. So I wanted to use this moment, but also it was a pretext because I had the idea before I really, before the carving studio, I kind of had the idea, I wanted to play with light, how light reacts with marble, and kind of have these very bright white and these shadows. And the idea I had is that, you know, if I make an irregular shape and I carve a pattern on it, it will kind of enhance this relief quality that I could give to marble. So I kind of just wanted to try that. So it actually worked because, you know, before the pattern was carved, it was very different. And then it became really more like dramatic. And, you know, it started to, I played with the light and it started to look light, like lightweight. Yeah, this is, it was more like what I wanted to try there, but you know, how also like in these tiny little holes, how the, you know, it would be like in a shade part of the marble piece, but the light will hit, like, let's say, like you know, hit a point here, so it will really make the relief look even more in relief. So yeah, so this is what I was trying. So the carpet was just a pretext to play with this. So the detail. And this is the very last piece I made. It was actually, I think it was the last day, and my foot was injured, and I just like I wanted to finish, like do all the ideas I had in mind. And you know, in Quebec we have narvals, whales, so there's kind of this idea. I just really wanted to make like a unicorn horn and leave it somewhere in the carving studio garden, so it looks like, you know, a unicorn was there or something. So, and I tend to cheat a little bit. I was at the carving studio and used the angle grinder a lot to carve my pieces. But for this piece, Tom kind of, I think he received a donation. There was like a family of a carver who carved like some of the marbles in Washington. So they donated all his chisels, and because I was the artist in residence, Tom kind of made me try them. So I carved this piece with that, and it was actually very fun. They were great chisels. So it was all, yeah, he kind of forced me to do it the more traditional way. It was a nice exercise. Okay. Digital fabrication, playing with the machine. I don't know how we're doing with time. Okay, I'm gonna go quick from here, but so this is actually the first piece I made with digital fabrication. So I just had this memory of like hiking and feeling, you know, very grounded in my body, and then I flew the next day on the same space, same site, and I saw how I was a tiny dot in the landscape. So kind of this shift in scale, I wanted to play with that a little bit. So I made this tiny mountain with this walking stick that has an imprint of my hand, but an imprint that's a bit scaled up, so it doesn't really fit a hand. So I wanted to play with scale, but it's interesting when I look at my work that I made with the machine, there's a lot of like, you know, I'm interested in the process of making things by hand today, and how like having hands-on, you know, creates some sort of connection, direct connection to the piece. But, you know, when I work with the machine where I was a bit removed from the material, I will put the, you know, imprints of my hands and things like really clear, you know, mark of my presence. So yeah, so I scanned a piece of clay that I squished my hand and a twig, and then I made a file, merged them, and I had a CNC machine carve them. And also like a lot of the work I made with the machine look like very natural. So I kind of wanted to play with this idea of like artificial natural animating. So this is another one. This one is called Big Squish. This one is reaching the top. Yeah, so this is a similar process. I press a piece of clay with my hand and scan it and make a scaled up version. So it's about 3 feet by 3 feet. So, and at this scale, it looks also like very like a natural object, but almost like, you know, manifestation of erosion or something like that. So it's another process. So at this time, I didn't really know that, like now I could do this by hand, but I didn't really know. So I was playing a lot with the machine, but you know, now I look at it and I don't think it's like, it's actually not easier really to work with the machine. The process is just very different. And the way I see it is like, you know, it's not like, okay, this takes me 100 hours to make by hand, and like how many hours this will take me to make with the machine. It's more, if I spend 100 hours with the machine, what could I do? You know, it's a very different way of thinking and working, which is also labor intensive, but you're a bit more remote, yeah, from removed like from the material. This is another piece I made. This is from my oldest memory. I think I was 2 years old, 3 years old, and my mother was making homemade Play-Doh, and I just remember thinking that it was so beautiful because it was bright pink, that it was probably super delicious. So I asked her, you know, to give me a spoon of it, and she did. And I remember that I cried because it was just like, it was very salty, and I really had a clash between my perception of reality and reality. And from this image in my mind, I just had an image of making like a mound out of this homemade Play-Doh. And I was just thinking of this image of like eating spoons and spoons of disappointment. And then from there, when I started to do this mount, it became a mountain. And then I realized that I didn't carve any mountain. This is the Mont Blanc, which is the highest peak in the Alps. And this story is really well documented. So I realized that I have a connection with this mountain because in 2005, I lived in a small town in France, and I will see and stare at the mountain from my balcony every day. And it was part of my daily life landscape. But I knew also that it was very far away and unreachable, and that the reality of the mountain was way bigger and intricate than what I could perceive. So it, this relation between reality and perception kind of brought me back to the Play-Doh story. So that was kind of fun. And there's a lot of handprints in this work too. And also, like, you can have a landscape view of it, or come closer and have this more topographical aerial view of it, which plays also with the body and the scales. I think this is the last work. So this piece, it started with a painting. So I wanted to capture the movement of the grass, basically. And when I did it, I thought it kind of, I used a big brush and a small brush, and I thought it kind of looked like, prints, fingerprint, like hand marks. So I decided to carve hands that match the size of the marks. So I made a big hand and a small hand. And I just felt that they're based on my hand. They're very like delicate. And I just felt it was this nurturing quality of the big hand looking after the small one or something like that. So I decided to make the marks an embroidery because it's something my mother showed me to do. So, and I kind of had this image of maybe the hands will have done the embroidery or something like that. So I talked a little bit about, this relation of proximity with women, which is also very present in my family. And so the relation of touch and sharing and kind of this the sharing of embroidery. I wanted to bring this back in the work. So these and they go together like that. I'm gonna show you the process of these to explain a bit my work with the machine, and I'm almost done. So this is pretty much the most complicated thing I made with the machine, with the CNC. So basically how, it will work, you will make a mold of your hand in the position you want, and then a 3D scan of it, and then you slice it in a file to fit the thickness of your material. In this case, I use like plywood. So we kind of have to slice it. And then this specific type of cut, and the CNC works like X, Y, and Z. So it carves me that way. And then I flip the material on the table. So I had to make a file where like the top and bottom kind of match for the flipping part, which was kind of a bit tricky. And doing that weirdly helped me to understand how to deconstruct a form in order to carve by hand, really, because like later on now I can carve things like very with a lot of tiny details by hand, but I really wasn't able to do that before I worked with the machine. So it was kind of interesting to me to make this work, and it really helped me to think about, because when you carve things by hand, you kind of have to think about in every plane of your object, what's the highest point? Like, okay, so this is the point I keep, and then what's the second highest point? So you go there second, and then until you go into this kind of deeper part. And working with the machine, slicing my thing, it kind of really helped me to understand that, which is not something it was a given for me. So now I'm able to do like really more complicated and intricate carvings. This is the model. This is the carved part by hands, which I mean, it was interesting to me, like a discovery, being like, oh, when I was able to do that, and it just kind of happened. Yes, so this is just a little installation view, and we can open to questions if you have questions. Thank you. I'm done. Any questions? No?
Yeah, I missed what was the stone that you carved the lace in? You said that if you soaked it, it was soft enough to carve. It was amazing.
Oops, I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop sharing because I don't see you. Okay, sorry. So yeah, it's called, I mean, I guess in Italy they call it tuffo, but it's just volcanic stones.
Oh, okay.
But these specific volcanic stone come from the Vesuvius because of the geography or of where I was. But I don't know if like any volcanic stones work that way. I would think so, but I haven't tried other volcanic stones. So yeah, it was interesting because it's very long lasting, because it's hard. It's not like clay, you know. It's really you know, some of the constructions since the Roman times are still standing in this specific stone. So it's but it's like, yeah, when you wet them, it becomes like yeah, like maybe a piece of clay or something like that. It becomes very soft.
I've carved volcanic stone that was mailed to me from Portland, but I didn't think about soaking it. You know, it was
yeah, you should try. I really don't know if it's all volcanic stone, but it's very common there to soak them and then rechange, and then they become hard again after.
Amazing. Amazing work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I also think it's amazing work. It's quite beautiful. And it was especially fascinating to hear the intellectual inspiration behind each piece. I'm curious, what are you working on next?
So next I'm gonna do well, I have a solo show coming. Well, I said I had a baby, so I tried to figure out the pace of doing things. So I asked them.
No sleep. Sleep is not allowed when you have a baby.
Yeah, I asked to have it in 2024 in fall. Yeah, in fall. So so I'll have some time to work on that. But so yeah, it will be a solo show, all in wood. I think I'm gonna call it Lost in the Woods, but like Perdu en forêt in French, because my titles are often a bit like silly. But so I want to think about, I mean, what I mentioned a little bit, how to think about woods, like fibers work and develop different patterns and shape, but also I also want to think about the quality of ornamentation, you know, and in carving sculptures, you know, how like well, one of the thing I think about is like, when I make a piece, I spend so much time with it because it's, you know, and my hands are on it, and it's very meditative, but there's also something intimate, I guess, that I developed with the piece, spending so much time with it. And I want to think also how you know, how people can live with a piece in their intimacy outside of the gallery space where we spend, you know, so like few time, like thinking about these affects of like you know, creating something that you want to live with, and you know, and get to know in your own space a little bit. So so they all will be in the wood, and they will have kind of this nurturing. I mean, I kind of have a plan of each object, what they're gonna be, but I also want to open to you know, to discoveries in the process. But so yeah, so I think I'm gonna, I mean, I do know that I'm gonna do a bit more research into fibers work for that too. And yeah, like bring some sense of movement and lightness within the solid material that's wood. I also think that's a challenge. I feel I think a lot about like each sculpture, each object while I'm working, and I spend so much time with this object, but I like the how you call this in mise en espace in English, like a, you know, to put the work in a space, and thinking of the space is really not one of my strengths. So you know, having this space for the solo show will really give me the opportunity to think about that, how to present, you know, the work, and how to also integrate the presentation object with the work, and so yeah, that's pretty. So I mean, I'm gonna do some more meticulous woodwork that takes forever, but thinking, you know, in a body of work that will live together in a solo show. Yeah,
Ingrid, can you talk a little bit about the venue that you're going to be?
Oh yeah. So some of the wood work, I mean, the network and the icons, I'm gonna show them in Paris at the Grand Palais, you say that in English, this summer. So it will be a biennale. I think it's really interesting because it's a biennale for contemporary art and crafts. And I think it's like interesting, like in English schools, how craft is really integrated in the contemporary art, but in Quebec, or like métier d'art, it's really sometimes very separated from the art world. So this is more like like a meeting of both, thinking of material based practice, basically, which I think it would be great. So there would be artists from all over the world coming for this. There's a lot of country and artists there, but this year it's the theme is Québec à l'honneur. So really the spotlight will be on our artists from Quebec, which will be nice. So I'll go there and meet some people, and it'll be nice. I'm excited.
By the way, your English was fine. We totally understood.
Okay. Yeah, I did, because I was used to functioning in English in my daily life, but you know, now I don't speak as much in English these days.
You're supposed to say c'est magnifique.
C'est magnifique. Thank you. I'm a bit rusty, but I hope it was intelligible for you. You understood. Any other questions?
I just want. Go ahead.
Oh,
go ahead.
go for
Haley.
it.
No, Haley. I was going to go ahead.
Haley. Yeah, and then Carol after.
Well, I just wanted to say that I really liked hearing you talk about your conceptual practice, and I liked hearing, you know, 'cause, like, I feel like every piece has a story and like a different sort of individual association. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about them collectively and how they all relate, because, you know, fibers and craft and like sort of this history and also memory. I think I saw your first piece about the sunset over the landscape, and I was like, this is immediately like about memory. So, and that's a beautiful piece, by the way. So I guess it's more of a comment than a
Thank you.
question, but I really liked hearing
all
you.
you say is making so much sense, and I'm really, I mean, it's also a discovery for me to be like, hey, like, okay, I'm interested in this specific story, but yeah, once you use, and I was talking to Carol about it, like, it's interesting to do those talks, because, you know, you take all your work, but also your current work or your newer work, and then you put this all together and you're like, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense. Even if I thought I was interested in this like specific thing, like altogether it starts really to make sense, which is, I think it's interesting. I also really like the format of artist talk, where it's like an hour or like this length, because, you know, when I'm gonna have to give I think it's like each slide it's like 20 seconds, and there's like very like few minutes, and I'm really bad at that, because I'm like, I like to elaborate and say what I had in mind. I feel like I can't just speak of my work in 20 seconds. It's just too hard.
I really want to know more about the paper piece that you showed.
Oh,
at the end,
yeah. Well, this one is, yeah, I just made one, but they're gonna be more of them. But it's, I call them as epistolary. Is that a word in English? Epistolary relationship. So it's, you know, when you have a correspondence with someone. I just
Got it right.
Yeah. Okay. I just thought like, I was just like thinking, like, now we have emails and everything, but how like I just found this box of like correspondent I had like when I was a kid, and this practice of having someone you write to on a regular basis and waiting for that. So it was kind of this starting point for those papers. Yeah, epistolary relationship. But I'll make a couple of and I'll probably, well, in French, the word paper sheet and leaf, it's like the same word. So I'll probably make also a carving of little crumble leaf. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a formal pun, like we can do that. Carol, you also had a question? Or?
It was really echoing what Haley said, because I love the projection and the low-tech approach to that whole experience, but time and memory. And I think I mentioned before that the weaving that you used in the carved pieces, in the low relief, they really seemed like they belonged together with the ribbons across the water.
The video piece.
Yeah, so, I wouldn't undersell yourself in terms of the materials that you work in. I think they're all there, and they're marvelous.
That makes sense. I think this is one thing that I need to expand on conceptually, because now I'm starting to realize that the weaving pattern is pretty much in every material that I'm using, and I never really took the time to understand. I'm like, oh yeah, idea meet connect. Like there are like things like and superficially that I have in mind, but I really want to dig a bit more into that and explore. I if I could, I will actually like to do another MFA in fibers art and kind of start to really make sense of all this. But I guess I could also do this research by myself. But yeah, I think this is because now I don't think it's gonna go away. Like bless you. Okay. Yeah, it's not like a one-time thing. I feel like it's coming in pretty much a lot of things that I'm doing. The weaved, quality of things. Yeah. Any more questions? Or good. Okay. Well, you can always, if you're shy or you can always write to me. I'll be happy to chat with you. But yeah, it was a real pleasure to be able to be here and show this body of work with you and see you all. Haley, I'm so excited to see you. It's been we should do this more often.
Nice to you all the time. So nice to see you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. It was really wonderful, and please keep us posted. We'll disseminate the information about your upcoming show, and
thank you so much.
Wish you the best of luck.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to visit you someday in the future.
Please do.
With the baby. It's more complicated now, but I really would love to.
Yeah, it's only 3 hours.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
For being here. Okay. Have a good evening.
Good night.